Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast. Before we get to the main brunt of this forecast, let's take a little bit of a look at what's happened during this past week. Well, the big news has been the heat. And we have seen pretty much 2 consecutive weeks now of temperatures well into the 90s for a vast majority of the state, with 100-degree readings. Been fairly common the last few days across portions of the Panhandle and the Southwest. And of course, the lack of precipitation has been a concern. We kind of dragged this out for a good portion of eastern Nebraska for the last month. And it's taken an impact on the crops. We're seeing the crops falling apart rather rapidly, and I suspect that we're going to see some detrimental impacts from this dryness on yields. How bad of a situation it is remains to be determined, because we certainly do have another stretch of hot weather ahead of us before a more significant cooling trend might be in the offings as we get into late next weekend. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we may have in store for us as we progress through this period. And the first thing I'll draw your attention to is the big expansive area of high pressure that's dominated much of the Central Plains over the last 10 to 14-day period is now showing signs of breaking down and pushing toward the west in response to a trough coming out of central and northern Canada. Now, this trough will be moving toward the east-southeast, and so it's just going to likely clip eastern Nebraska and leave the vast majority of the very cool temperatures to the east of us, but it does provide us with the opportunity for a little bit of a moisture. Now, the surface front with this trough moving in isn't expected to move into our region until after midnight, so the thought is that we will not see any thunderstorm activity, at least in the southern half of the state, until we get well into tomorrow morning. But for the northern part of the state, we might generate a couple scattered thunderstorms as this front pushes through. For those that are going to the game in Lincoln, it does appear that we'll see fairly hot conditions in Lincoln, with game time temperatures somewhere between 89 and 92 degrees. And as we get to the 10 p.m. hour, which should be wrapping up the game, we'll be looking at temperatures that will be in the upper 70s to the low 80s and probably cooling down to the low 60s. And then the thunderstorm chances will roll in, even though they're only about a 10 to 20% chance. Now, as we get into tomorrow, we'll see that the main activity of this upper air trough is going to move the energy to the east of us. So that just leaves us with scattered thunderstorms. And at that in eastern Nebraska, 20 to 30% coverage. Total quantitative precipitation output for this next 5-day period is only looking to be in the quarter to half-inch range. If you do get a thunderstorm, you might get some heavier totals, but overall, not expecting a big washout as we go forward in time. Now, as we get into Monday, with that cool air in place and pushing that ridge back down, we do expect to see some fairly nice conditions in eastern Nebraska, but the temperatures will start to rise in western Nebraska in response to this ridge, once again rebuilding into the region. As we go into Tuesday, we'll see that that ridge builds up even farther, starts to push the warmer air into eastern Nebraska, and then by the time we get into Wednesday, we'll see that that big core of that ridge starts to materialize. The Four Corners region is going to push toward the Central Plains. So by the time we get to Thursday, here it is sitting very well firmly in place, but notice another trough coming in. That's expected to arrive this weekend, so the hot conditions will continue with just a scattered, isolated thunderstorm possible across the western half of the state. And as we get into Friday, here comes that trough, which is expected to push in on Saturday and give us a shot of decent moisture. So in terms of the temperatures, nothing we can say but hot, hot, hot. Just isolated thunderstorm activity Saturday and Sunday, and possibly again on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, particularly in western Nebraska. 8 to 14-day forecast pushes that cooler air to our east, and in terms of precipitation, we do start to see that moisture moving in response to that trough building from the Pacific Northwest.